10 here on Pure West Radio. And as typically we do on the January show, we are the second Thursday of every month. We look at intentions, we look at resolutions, we look at how we're going to lay the foundations for an excellent year in the life of you. But it's important to say that, well, first of all, are your reasons for doing so your own? Is your why strong enough? And if not, or even if they are, what happens should there be some stumbling blocks in the road? Hayley, you brought this forward for discussion, and I'm going to coin the phrase expectation versus reality. So give us that headline. In fact, before you do that, if you want to get involved, we're live on social media. You can call or WhatsApp on 01437 764455. Use the PWR app, or you can email studio@purewestradio.com. So join the conversation, of which Hayley's going to give us the headline of the reflection that you've been doing about expectation.
Yeah. I think if you think about it, so let me set a little scenario now, okay? So you're with your partner and you agree to go out for food in a fancy restaurant, okay? You get dressed up in your, dressed to the nines in your posh suit and whatever else, your jewellery, Tom, your shoes. And your partner turns around and they're in jeans and just a top. And you head to the restaurant and it's McDonald's.
Oh,
How do you feel?
Goldie looking chain. I want to take you to McDonald's with a candle. Girl, it's my love you can't handle.
Sounds like a
plan. Oh gosh. So yeah, I'm going to take you out to a fancy restaurant, and you've been hoodwinked into going to McDonald's, but you're in your finery, you're in your sparkles, you've got your nice earrings on, you've done your lippy, and you go to some place and it's like, what, here? If you're listening and that's maybe happened to you, or you're thinking, well, it's our date night coming up, and maybe I am going to get glammed up, and I'm going to be duped into thinking, what, we're just going to go to the cafe, we're not going to go to the lovely restaurant in the nearby town. First of all, if it has happened to you, what did you do? And if it happened to you, what would you do? So they're my questions that I'm posing to you whilst we consider this one. Tammy, I'm going to throw it over to you first.
Oh, thank you. I think, it's just that it's the difference between disappointment and excitement. And it all depends on whether you, and this is because of my background, I suppose, is whether the glass is going to be half full or half empty. So whether you just embrace it, or whether it does lead to that frustration, it all depends on you. So there's no kind of, I'm not going to give a textbook answer, because it's very much on how you respond to a situation.
I love your answer, though. I absolutely love it. It's that fine line between disappointment and excitement. Hayley, what are your thoughts on hearing that answer for early doors?
I think you've missed the point.
Oh, no.
No, as in, right? Because your answer was about your response, right? Yeah. But who really has disappointed you? Who out of that scenario, you or your partner, who has really disappointed you?
Oh, so hang on now. I'm going to try and understand this. So of course, are you saying that we've potentially already jumped a hurdle by looking at how we respond to the situation?
Yes.
Ah, so person A has promised a lovely night out.
No, hang on now. You've agreed together.
Okay.
Nobody's agreed. You've agreed together to go to a fancy restaurant or whatever the words were.
Yeah.
and you get there and you're disappointed. Who's actually disappointed you?
Ooh, because we're into the realm, like in this particular situation, we're into the realms of mind reading, and no clear communication is where I'm jumping to now.
I don't know. I don't think there's one answer is where I'm going to go with this, unless I'm overthinking it. So you could say your partner's disappointed you because he's taken you to McDonald's and your expectation was to go to a fancy, expensive restaurant, however you worded it. Or is the disappointment in yourself for having that reaction?
Oh, I'm intrigued.
I'm intrigued because it's logic versus emotional there for me in my head.
Yeah, Helen, like myself and Tammy, has jumped forward to the response. Make it into a laughable moment, and then make it a tradition to have a date night in McDonald's, all glammed up. And again, this is looking at response. However, before we respond to something, we do react to something. A response is something that we have to make a conscious decision of doing. But there's a moment before then where you walk through that, well, you pull into the car park, you react before you respond, whether you verbalize it or not. Your body's doing something. And there's that moment of, oh yeah, let's go to a fancy restaurant. Is one person doing it malevolently and just leading the other person up the garden path? Or have you in your own mind decided, fancy to me equals this, and I'm not going to communicate it?
But fancy to somebody else is McDonald's.
Yeah.
You are both correct. So,
Oh, it's like a quiz again, Tom, back at Christmas.
I know.
so the expectations, really, you've disappointed yourself because you set your expectations without having that communication, as you said earlier, Tom. And this is part of the problem why expectations are so destructive. We have our expectations in our head, so we set a picture of what we think it should look like. We set an idea of what the ambience should be like. We want the table to be set a certain way. We want to be served a certain way, or whatever those expectations are. And you didn't tell anybody that that was your expectation, so you couldn't have a conversation about the reality of it because nobody spoke. Now, you can take that in every area of life. You can take it to your goal setting, because I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to eat salad for the next week. I'm going to lose half a stone. You've disappointed yourself because you haven't lost half a stone, not because you haven't worked hard, but because you set that expectation and assumed it was going to happen. So expectation is destructive because we don't communicate, and it's an assumption. We're setting this picture and this story up, and we're letting ourselves down. But imagine how many relationships are struck by expectation, and divorce is caused by expectation over actual problems.
Oh gosh. And this is Frank who joined us in December, talking about money and any issues that you may have. You watch it back over on the YouTube or listen back to the whole show on the website. You would have both had too high expectations or need better communication. And that communication, it's with significant others, but it's with yourself, isn't it? And knowing what we're aiming for. This is what you're getting at, is if we're setting an expectation for what? And does this kind of link with the why, or is this purely like a visual thing, an expectation?
I think expectation is not linked to the why per se. I think it's linked to results. I think we're more intentions, and goal setting is more why, sort of, I think closely linked to why. Expectations, what happens in you after you've started, even, I suppose, even intention, right? So I get up in the morning, I'm in a good mood, I'm going to have a good day, I'm going to be happy in work, I'm going to get all my work done, I'm going to get home, pick the children up and blah, whatever. So there's your day set out in your head. You get to work, phone is ringing off the hook. You're an hour in, you haven't even sat down with your first client or your first admin duty. 2 hours have gone by, you still haven't sat down because you've had these problems, and all of a sudden your day's gone. You're not a happy bunny. You pick the kids up, you're grumpy, you're irritable, you're impatient. and now your whole day feels ruined. But it wasn't because of what's happened. It's because you expected it to go a certain way and it didn't.
Yes, so expectations are a natural part of human behavior. And it's how we manage them. Because like you say, your expectations for the day, you might have it perfectly planned how it's going to unfold. And because of factors outside of your control, whether it's the bus running late or lots of phone calls happening or just chaos in the office, as an example, that impacts on how you had planned, rehearsed your day in your head. So again, if you didn't, it's about then managing your reactions. It's about managing, how you respond in any given situation that doesn't go to plan.
I suppose prior to that, because we'll get on to reactions and responses, but I suppose prior to that, what markers are you using to set your expectation in the first place? I suppose is something that we then need to consider is I'm going to have the perfect day where I wake up in sunshine and I put my shorts and t-shirt on and then I drive to work where all my colleagues are smiling and there's a hot cup of tea waiting for me and some squash. And then all of a sudden you actually wake up and that's an extreme example, but it's -3 outside and you've got to scrape the ice off the car. No one else is in work because they're ill, which means that you've been lumbered with monitoring 3 inboxes. And then all of a sudden, this wonderful day that you had planned in your head when you went to bed and you set your intentions the day before, and you're like, yes, tomorrow is going to be wonderful. But actually, it was never realistic. And how closely linked to reality do we need to link the expectation in the first place to make sure that we don't get too upset?
This is the management system that we need in place. It's okay to have expectations. Of course it is.
Mm-hmm.
However, you can't expect to go to McDonald's and eat a fancy meal. So, and as we said earlier, isn't it, that the fancy meal bit was the miscommunication. But with our expectations, we think about expectations being, you generally sort of in our head, we want something done a certain way. Unless we communicate that, there's going to be crossed wires because nobody has the same perspective or perception of something as you do. So I think another example would be food, right? So I might say to you, I love this Chinese restaurant. The food is absolutely amazing. And you go and you're like, it's awful. It's terrible. I would never go there again. The service was awful. The food is awful. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been there what I've put in your head is tasty food. I don't know what food tastes like to you. We are eating the same food. We don't know what each other is tasting.
Yeah.
So
it's a really good example.
And etching out the expectation, having a conversation with your partner, with your friend, with yourself even. Is it realistic to expect this to happen on this day or by that date? And I think it actually reduces that feeling of disappointment and letting yourself down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think by understanding where your expectations come from as well, gives you a better way to handle them. And it almost bridges that gap then. And I suppose, I know we're going to talk about reactions afterwards, but by actually understanding where your expectations come from, we can then just ground ourselves a bit more when it doesn't go to plan, when reality doesn't go to plan, sorry.
Yeah. That is a very valid point. If you're brought up in a family of like high achievers, the expectation will be, well, I'm going to follow in footsteps, for example, or actually I'm going to branch out and do my own thing. I'm going to imagine my life separate from the family fold, for example. That's a typical example that I've heard in the past. But I suppose we don't want to eradicate expectation, because now I'm thinking with my sports hat on, where as a sports person, you're told to visualize the outcome that you desire, which is an expectation. So when I strike this penalty, I'm going to visualize that I'm going to strike it sweetly and it's going to go in top bins in the top right. and my expectation is that I'm going to score a goal, and then there's going to be raucous applause, and yes, he's scored his first ever goal. But even then, I've gone too far, because if I'm expecting a big response and everyone's like, oh, great, we scored another goal, but bearing in mind we're 5-1 down, it doesn't mean anything, then maybe that's blighted and the expectation's already been overcooked, and it's like, oh, it was my moment. but we do still need to visualize, don't we?
Yeah, because I really like that example, because in that situation, I would say, and I don't know whether I'm trying to figure this as I'm speaking, I'm trying to figure this out, right? I'm visualizing scoring the goal, everybody clapping, and it doesn't happen. You've already, no, question, if you've already gone, if it doesn't happen, what am I going to learn from it? It changes the, I suppose it changes the intention of that visualization, and because now you're going to learn from it. Whereas expectation, I want all these things to happen, and I have no kind of, if it doesn't happen, I have no recourse. Whereas now, if you've got recourse, if you say, right, if it doesn't happen, yes, I want it to happen, I'm going to visualize it. If it doesn't happen, I'm going to sit down and go, okay, so where in the process did it go wrong? That's a different outcome altogether.
Yeah. Oh God, it's quite a minefield, isn't it? And Tammy, you've got thoughts about, because we all have, like, it's intrinsic part of who we are. When someone says a word, we're going to go somewhere fancy tonight, we conjure up our own personal image. But of course, we're an amalgamation of different factors. And Tammy, you've got thoughts on some of these factors, which might help someone unpick where their expectations come from, which might be able to stem them a little bit if they're always feeling let down by their own thoughts and outcomes, almost. So give us an idea, Tammy, as to where this expectation building might come from.
The expectation building, it can come from family, it can come from friends, it could be ingrained, it could be from like a really young age, but it can come from personal beliefs as well. And our own beliefs shape our perspective on things. They guide us, they make us react in a certain way, they make us respond in a certain way. There's so many factors that come into play. And it's so really, it's important to just delve down into expectation versus reality, because it's such a powerful concept. And I think, as Hayley alluded to and explained, as soon as we start to actually understand the process, it really empowers us. Because again, we can't control everything externally. We only can control how we react, how we respond. But just to have that better understanding, whether it's an expectation or whether there's an intention, and how we can learn from an intention, it just makes things so much lighter for people.
Expectations. We often share what we're reading at any given time, and through reading, I've realized that I've managed to almost train myself to recognize when I've gone beyond visualization and I've gone to expectation. I love visualizing because, say, if I'm running a music workshop, I need to visualize a structure and a pattern in my head. So when I come to deliver it, it's not all off the cuff. There is some form of planning and some form of idea as to what journey I'm going to go in that session. But what I've kind of trained myself to look at is I can only deliver what I can visualize in my head. I can't visualize responses. What I end up doing is visualizing multiple responses so I can be adaptive to different situations that come back to me, so I'm not caught off guard. But if I start thinking, this is the way it's going to go, and that's my expectation, and if it doesn't go that way, I'll be disappointed. Well, actually, their response to me is to do with their factors as well as my delivery. But I can't let that beat me up. So I get to that point of expectation where I'm like, stop there. Because if it doesn't go that way, then it does and it doesn't matter. Because there's always something that I can do to mold and adjust and change. And that's where I kind of draw the line at visualization expectation. I don't really have many expectations anymore. Because I do have them, but I'm very quick to recognize them and be like, that would be cool if that happened. Next. But I don't set my stall out on them to get rid of the opportunity for being let down and disappointed. Hayley, what are your thoughts on listening to me unpack that live on the radio?
I like it because now we're talking about bringing intention into it. Because now you're being more intentional about and realistic about the outcome, the actions you'll take and the outcomes you might get or might not get. So I think we've knocked expectation on the head slightly now, and we're more into intention.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost that go with the flow would be a nicer way to say it, because you can never plan for every eventuality. Nobody can.
I try my best. I'm exhausted all the time, but no, you're right though, aren't you? Like, there's so many variables that we can't even fathom. It's more by luck than judgment that most things happen in a typical way. But actually, anything could happen. Tammy, what are your thoughts on hearing this? Talking of expectation, when Drew joined us now on Instagram, he probably didn't expect me to say happy birthday to him. Happy birthday, Drew.
I think it's just, like I say, you can't plan for everything. You can have, something in your toolbox, your go-to that probably does fit the majority of the time. But again, it's about being flexible. It's about being accommodating. But at the same time, sometimes as humans, we don't like to be flexible. We don't, not in a gymnastic kind of way, but we don't like to kind of like change too much because we see it as a threat, or it might become a bit more stressful, a bit more anxious. So, we have to be conscious of that when we go from, into the realms of intentions, versus expectations as well. So, it won't sit okay with everyone. And I also think we need to kind of acknowledge that bit as well.
Yeah. Hayley, you're the one that brought this to us. You've heard us very much unpack and reflect in the moment. I know that you've been reflecting over the last couple of weeks. What outcomes or what learnings have you taken from considering expectations and moving into intentions?
I've had to bring myself back from certain expectations because I have very high expectations of myself. So I have to be very careful because it becomes unhealthy. It becomes quite negative. So what I've been doing, rather than certain expectations or moving forward, I've just been reflecting on what's going on for me so I can decide how to put that into practice to be more intentional. So expectations are fun, yes. It's nice to think that, I don't know, when your parents say you're going on a trip somewhere or you're going somewhere for, it's nice to have all those thoughts in your head. But it depends on if you're left with disappointment after or you're feeling let down after, it's a negative thing. So I think pick a system or a strategy that works for you, that you have a handle on, that you can manage, and stick with that. Use it until it doesn't work anymore, and then find the next system. So whether it is being more intentional, managing your expectations, setting goals, whatever it looks like for you, and it works, do it. There's no right or wrong here. There is no one size fits all. There's no one thing that's going to work for everybody.
Yeah. What I love about your example there with going on a trip is we're going to go on a trip, and then your expectation might be one thing. Say, we're going on a trip, we're going to go rambling up the mountains, and then you end up going to the beach. and then because you had that expectation of, oh, I was expecting to be walking up and down Dales, whatever, and then you end up in Dale on a sandy beach, and you think, oh, well, this is what I had in my mind, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of a disappointing day, when actually you've had a nice trip out. You've still actually gained an experience that you didn't know what you were getting yourself in for. You just knew you're going to experience something, and it goes back to that. Trying to find alternative. Oh well, if it's that, then I'm gonna try and do that. I'm gonna walk up the mountains at a certain pace. But if it's the beach, I'm gonna relax. I'm having different ways of responding to that stimulus, because you've still done something nice and something a bit different potentially. Whereas opposed to you tarnish it with, oh well, it wasn't actually what I wanted to do anyway. And it's like, oh, but you did, and that's a wonderful thing. You did it.
Can I give you another example? Parenting example.
Yeah.
Go for it. I'm not qualified, but go for it.
Well,
Tammy,
you've probably taken children out at some point, but parents will often say that, oh, my child's a nightmare when we're out and about. I can't take them shopping, can't take them anywhere. But what they do, the mistake they make is they say to them, we're going shopping. Okay, now you must behave. Okay. Kid gets to the shop and is like, oh my God, sweet toys, everything. Now, if at the start of that, the parent sits down and says, we're going shopping, there's no toys, there's no sweets, you're going to hold my hand all the way around, or you can push the trolley. If you behave, if it all goes well up until that point, you may be able to, whatever the rules of the day are, the child is more likely to behave and do what you want them to do, expect them to do, than if you don't tell them. But if you have expectations in your head, you are setting the other person up to fail if you're not sharing them.
That's a great example. Yeah, because it's that inner dialogue that I've just had with myself about going shopping. And I'm sure there's listeners or viewers can completely empathize with this. You know, you are going out on that shopping trip, and you might have it played out in your head how perfect it's going to be. But like you say, unless you say it to the 10, 9, 4-year-old, you don't let them know. Their expectation is going to be very different to yours.
I love that.
And they might have their own expectations about what's going to happen, that we're going to go shopping and we're going to get sweets and we're going to get a toy, because you've done that last time. So there could even be that pattern matching. But again, if you do the same, expect the same.
Yeah, I love that, because that brings us full circle. I'm going to put Frank's comment back on the screen. Need better communication. We lead busy lives, which we're going to talk about next, before the end of the show, and how we can find this lovely medium of looking after all facets of our life. But better communication, is it worth just taking that extra minute to sit your child down in that example and say, here's what we're going to be doing, and here's what we're not going to be doing, so the boundaries are set. And that also leads you into a wonderful space of, if you can under promise, and then if they have been really good throughout the end of the day, and you'll be like, actually, here's a chocolate bar to finish the day, we are going to do that, and then all of a sudden you've now over delivered, and it's like, oh wow, I knew that that wasn't going to happen, and now I've got one. All of a sudden, what was an expectation for one person has now become a treat, and it's like, this is the best day ever, when actually it wasn't going to be that before, because you've taken the time to communicate the needs and the wants, and you've been able to put yourself in a position of, actually, it's been a great day. You have a chocolate bar, I've had a peaceful day, everyone's winning.
I love that. I love that reward at the end, and explain to them that you've been really good, you did as I asked you to do, I've had a good day, you've had a good day, let's have a treat together. It's lovely, isn't it? But I think we really get lost in our expectations, And I would love to hear from people who have set expectations and realise after that it was their mistake, not somebody else's. If we self-reflect without sharing, nobody needs to share this if they don't want to, but how many times have we set people up to fail when we've had expectations and not communicated what those expectations are, and yet we've expected a partner, a friend, a family member, a child to do what you think is supposed to be done?
Oh, I would have lost count.
I'm with Tammy countless times. And it goes back to that saying as well, that never meet your heroes, because we're so used to putting them on a pedestal. We don't know them. They're just other human beings. And all of a sudden you meet them and you might catch them on a bad day. And you're thinking, oh, I loved you in that, yeah, whatever. Because we don't, like, their agent might have just dropped them. Like, we don't know the circumstances of other people. And it's that weird thing of, you're almost like, don't meet your expectation, but have that idea. And if your expectation isn't met because you've set the others up to fail, which I know I certainly have, and it's that thing of, when we get over this, then I will be able to do this. And then all of a sudden you reach it, you're then expecting things to change at benchmarks, without communicating that either. It was like, oh, when this happens, I'll be that. I'll be far more relaxed when Christmas is over, and then Christmas is over, and then as Hayley and myself are finding, actually, I'm not relaxed. I'm far from relaxed. Help me, hold me onto the desk. And yeah, it's 100%. It's like, this date night's going to be the best one ever, but actually, the phone might ring. There might be an emergency. We just don't know. And it's like, your family member ruined date night because they rang you and they knew it was our date night. It's like, yeah, but they were kind of in need. It's like, but then do you then not take that? Like, there's so many factors when it comes
multi-layered.
It's a real tough one. But Hayley, going back to your original point, because there's so many layers, and because we typically have that one expectation or a theme around the outcome, more often than not, I would argue, the expectations are semi-designed to have us fail. Is that your conclusion, Hayley, and what we need to circumvent?
Yeah, I think if we don't manage our expectations, or we're not realistic in our expectations, we don't communicate. There's a lot of things around expectations, isn't there, in order to succeed with them. Depends who's involved, and there's lots of things, but it's up to us to be really accountable for how we perceive something is going to happen, and either share that or manage that, and be realistic about what's going on in front of you so that you can adapt if you need to. You might not need to, you might have somebody who constantly hits your high expectations. Something else has just come to me, but I could take this thread for the rest of the night. Because and maybe this will come in the next one as part of the challenge, because I think this does relate to the challenge in terms of self-expectation. How many of us self-sabotage through setting high expectations, knowing we are going to miss those expectations? I'm putting my hand up there. I can see you, Tom, as well.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking, just by even compare, it's that comparison, isn't it? To others that can actually make you do that as well.
You can.
Yeah.
I can see Tom.
I think I mentioned a couple of months ago that I've got this fancy piece of software. I know that I've talked with you guys about it, and it kind of helps allocate what tasks I've got to do. And then I look at it and I'm thinking, I know that won't be achieved in the time that's allocated for me to do it, but I'm going to keep it there because it's something that I still want to achieve. And then all of a sudden we've got expectation versus practical reality, my own reality of, is it going to get done, and do you still need to have that carrying around in your head, and what can you do about it, which is definitely the next thing we're going to be talking about. We've got a message on WhatsApp saying, I can relate to all of this.
Come join us on our challenge.
Yeah, come and join us on the challenge. And then very quickly, because we've talked about reaction previously, Tammy and I both answered your initial question with how we would respond to not having the expectation reached. Tammy, in summary, similar to what I think Helen said over on social media, what can we do if we do find ourselves in that expectation trap and we're thinking, well, this isn't what I thought? It's like Instagram versus reality. I've gone to a Caribbean paradise and it doesn't look like the postcard. Yeah, but you're still at a Caribbean paradise. What can we do if we find ourselves in our lovely little black dress with the sequins, our lovely earrings, and you've been taken to a fast food restaurant? What can we do in that moment?
There's two ways. Again, like I said, you either embrace it, or you don't. It's that, it's that glass is half full. So whether you just laugh about it and, like you say, it becomes a new tradition, or it becomes something that you joke about, but again, it just brings you together as a couple, or you choose to just spoil the whole evening, not go anywhere else. It all depends on you. You have control over how you respond. And if you go into it all positive, then whoever you're with, you're going to bring them up to being positive as well, as opposed to just, dragging them down just to being disappointed or negative and just, ruining the evening. So you have the choice, half full or half empty.
Yeah. And communication with yourself, communication with those around you. What are those set those boundaries, like Hayley gave with the example with taking your child out, and a whole other topic of conversation, defining who your child is, because if they hear it enough, there is evidence to suggest that that's what they're going to grow into, and that's the behavior attributes that they're going to look at. That's for a different show completely, but if you've got experience, send us an email at studio@purewestradio.com so we can delve deeper into that, should you so please. And communications, and we've had this on Confessions a few times on the breakfast show, which is on a Thursday morning, where significant others haven't necessarily had the best intentions for their significant other. And is there actually a hard reality conversation that needs to be had if you're constantly in a position of letting someone down because you're not clearly communicating? We'll save that for another show. Also, because still left this evening, similar to some of the examples that we talked about earlier, Obesity Awareness Week, we've got an interview regarding that coming up before 11 o'clock. It's coming up to 10:30 now. So we're going to take a moment, and when we come back, we're going to look at this challenge. Hayley and I were chatting over the Christmas break because, Hayley, just to reiterate, you had this fantastic 2 hours, getting up, doing your fitness regimen, and then having this focused 2 hours of work. And what happened as soon as reality set back in?
School. It all came crashing in again. Meetings, networking, everything just came into my life again. So we're going to learn, or we're going to at least challenge ourselves to balance that.
Amazing. So before we take this break, what is the challenge? What is it that you want people to consider as we take a moment? Hilariously, the song that we've got is Build Me Up Buttercup. Why do you build me up, Buttercup, just to let me down? It sounds like he expected something other than what he received. But I'll let you consider that. So what is the challenge? What is the sentence that we're going to come back in on?
Well, I suppose it's being more intentional, isn't it? But setting up your day so you get quality time in all areas of life.
In all areas of life. Have you defined those areas?
I haven't, but we're going to do it together.
We're going to do it together. So let's find out what areas of life we have. This is how we're going to end our discussion here before the obesity chat that we have. We're going to build up Buttercup with the foundations. It's 10:30. We'll be back in a couple of moments looking at this challenge of how we can be more intentional with our time when the world comes crashing back in together at once. I already know, having having been in the studio that I'm already behind. So we'll figure out what's going to happen, shall we? Build Me Up Buttercup plays for you here on Healthy Minds, Better Lives on Pure West Radio.